Hey there guys, this is JR Sightread and this is my loot from 1 hour of Elite Dungeons 1. This is not a guide, let me just make that clear. This is simply how I like to clear the dungeon. This does have some pretty steep requirements and is certainly something that is a little bit more towards the end game of content. Looking on screen now, I have two different presets. I have one for the boss clears and one for the mob clears. The main difference is the Scripture of Jazz for the bosses and the Scripture of Wen due to the AoE effects and a Ring of Death on the boss clears, which makes her managing adrenaline a little bit more nice. Time spent clearing the mobs became much easier after doing more runs of the dungeon itself. It was really nice using Threads of Fate and then a weapon spec or Volley of Souls, or even my Essence of Finality spec just to clear off the mobs and get to the boss. The first boss is the Sanctum Guardian, which after a bit of practice really isn't too bad, and you can usually take him down in around about a minute. Learning this boss really wasn't too hard. I just prayed Soul Split for the majority of the fight, switched over to Melee Prayer when he ducks down, and then built up to a Living Death rotation. Once I was in the Living Death rotation, I would sometimes hit a Split Soul, and going after a couple of Death Skulls and maybe a weapon spec, that seemed to take him down pretty fast. This boss really wasn't too bad, you've just got to watch out for the wave mechanic. I usually walked around on the first one and then used Resonance on the second one, and usually he was dead by that point, which wasn't too bad, and we would move over to the next boss. Now, learning the second part of the mob clears definitely put me in Death's office quite a few times. If you're not paying attention and you're praying the wrong thing, you can get hit pretty hard, especially the Hanto Cell Swords. I had to pray melee a couple of times to get through them, but again, using Threads of Fate, Volley of Souls, and a weapon spec before taking out the Zealots before Masuta seemed to prove to work the majority of the time. Now, learning Masuta probably sent me to Death's office more than anything else in the dungeon. This guy hits like an absolute truck, and if you're not paying attention and do not pray melee when you're supposed to, you are going to end up dead just like I did. I tried to use Death Skulls and then a Split Soul, and then hopefully by that point I've got enough adrenaline to switch to my melee prayer and hit devotion as quick as I can before getting back into Death's office. Once it was to this point, the fight really wasn't too bad. I'd build back up to using a Living Death rotation and hit Death Skulls before sending him into the Thrashing Water phase. Now, the Thrashing Water phase has got to be one of the most frustrating mechanics I have seen on a boss, purely because the mechanic is time gated. Masuta will jump into the air, and you have got around a minute and a half of just standing there, praying mage and killing the Thrashing Waters on the bottom half. That being said, it does give you a pretty good opportunity to build up your stacks. I just built up as much as I could, and then when I hit around the 2 minute mark, I would reconjure, hit a death mark, and then by the time he comes down, if I was feeling brave, I'd hit Split Soul, but for the majority of the time when I was doing the early runs, I would just pray mage, as his mage hit can knock you out pretty quickly, and his range hit doesn't really do too much damage. For the majority of the fight, you can genuinely just pray mage and knock him out from there. Around about 30 seconds later, he will go out. The more runs I did, the more comfortable I felt switching from Split Soul and then timing the mage hit, and it did take him down a couple of seconds earlier, but just to be safe, the majority of the time, I just prayed magic. After taking down Masuta as the final part of the mob clears, from the archaeology relics I was able to get enough adrenaline to get my devotion back, each prey, Threads of Fate, and then a blow or two on the pylons before banking and heading down towards Seiryu. Learning Seiryu really wasn't too bad, and I started to get really comfortable with it once I learned how to do the one cycle. The way I would start a fight is I would restore my conjures, I would then hit my Split Soul, Enhanced Excalibur, Ritual Shard, before surging in and then using a Bone Bomb and Death Skulls on Seiryu. Because I'm going to be up on the crystals in less than a minute or so, I would tend to quickly get off my weapon spec and Essence of Finality spec just for some extra damage. After that, it was a case of using a bloat and then building up enough stacks before getting up towards the crystal. After this point, it was just a case of resonance and devotion at certain times to make sure I wasn't going to get hit really bad before heading up the crystals. Learning the one cycle has got to be one of the most fun things I have learned since doing PVM. It really is nice when you get it right. Using Split Soul and then a 5-stack volley into 2 Finger of Deaths before building up enough stacks to get Living Death off was really nice and would usually take out the first crystal. Once I was at the second crystal, it really wasn't too bad at this point. It's a case of getting that Living Death rotation off right and getting off 2 death skulls. I would usually throw a couple of Finger of Deaths out there and try and build my stacks, because the Uber heals coming on that 3rd crystal. Usually the 2nd death skull would take out that 2nd crystal, which made it a lot easier, but making sure that Death Mark was on and using a Vuln Bomb caught me out a few times, but after a bit of practice it really wasn't so bad to get down. Finally, I would move on to the 3rd crystal. I would get a Death Mark on there and throw a Vuln Bomb. At first, when I was learning this, I just used to throw everything at the crystal. Realise I am not going to out damage that Uber heal. What I tried doing was waiting for the Uber heal to calm down. Once that Uber heal had calmed down, I then hit it with everything. I'd usually go in with a Death Skulls, a Split Soul, and then a Weapon spec and an Essence of Finality spec, and by that point, Seiryu was dead, and I gained my scales. Over the 4 kills that we did do within the hour, we did get 38, 4, 5 and 8, which added up to a total of 55 ancient scales, which for an hour is around about 55 mil. I'll show you the loot on screen now. 10 mil of that chest is from a Reaper assignment prior to me recording this video, but 55 mil in an hour for 4 runs is not bad at all. I'm sure there's much quicker way of doing the dungeon and getting more kills per hour, but this for me is pretty enjoyable, pretty chill, and a really fun boss encounter. But yeah, this was loot from an hour. My name's JR Sightread. Please subscribe, and peace.